Welcome to the Reimagining Work podcast. This is the 18th edition of the podcast. We are your hosts, John Wenger and Rogi Noord. In the wake of a Facebook post by John, we asked the question, are we evolving blindly? We think we do. We don't have time to catch up. We don't have time to stay in touch with everything. The Industrial Revolution didn't help much. And now with the digital age, everything is evolving at a blistering speed and we have trouble keeping up. We asked the question, are we losing sight of our humanity with all these quick technologies and distractions that we have nowadays? We hope you enjoy the podcast.
What are we ready for as humans? What's the workplace ready for? What the quote that was in one of the articles I read, which you've read, which I think speaks to a lot of the situation we find ourselves in. Let's just take, for example, digital social media as a potential collaboration tool for the workplace. I think affords us huge amounts of opportunity. But there's a quote, and I'd like to read this out because I think it's written really well. The excerpt goes, we have Stone Age emotions, Dark Age institutions, and a bunch of, these are my words, I've edited a bunch of whiz-bang technology, which we're just not able to fully comprehend, which I think is a tragedy. The article was something around economics and sustainability and climate and all that stuff. But I think it's relevant for the workplace because I've been thinking about the use of social collaborative tools in the workplace and how we have got ourselves these amazing technological things. And I've mentioned this to you before. We are still behaving like dicks to each other. And there's this stuff that I see about, collaborative tools and social business and all this sort of stuff. And why aren't we becoming more collaborative? And there must be something to do with changing the culture. And how do we get people to use these social tools? And I always come back to, and again, I acknowledge it comes from my own background and my training and my sort of personal trajectory. I come back to the bit that's really important is the social bit. And if we're dicks to each other, having all the Yammer and the Slack and the Facebook Messenger and the other whatever it is a red herring. And to say which one is the best way to get collaboration is a red herring. Really, I think the thrust should be on how can we actually become more collaborative as human beings. That, I think, will be the revolution in the workplace.
Isn't it something where you go and think we're unlearning our social behavior more and more rather than enhancing our social behavior? I mean, I'm sure we've always had like conflicts and on a small level, right? I mean, war is a persistent human state. I think we in the 20th century we literally only had like one day of peace on the whole world.
Good Lord.
Something like that, or a year.
But
no, my point is that I mean, in past time we had to be more social with each other because we were depending on each other more in a small local environment than we are now. I'm not dependent on my neighbor at all. So there's really no reason other than I want to, but there's no real reason for my survival that I would be friendly with him. And we're becoming more and more distant from each other.
I'm interested to hear what you think is the developments that have led to that, because I think you're right. Because at the same time, I also know that in terms of human beings that have been killed in conflict, that number has been declining for a long time. Not to say that the world is a lovely, peaceful place, but actual numbers of people dying.
That's just the evolution of the way we war. I mean, sure, of course,
Sure,
there's less people being killed if we use remote controlled drones. I mean, but the amount of drones
exactly.
that come
Yeah.
down are quite large. I mean, there's quite a few of them being shut down and all, and the victims they make. I mean, what we're talking about? Are we talking about collateral damage, or are we talking about the soldiers that are uh, in decline, the deaths, or is it like the people around them? I mean,
I think it's. I think I don't quote me on this, but it's something I read recently. I think it's all deaths in armed
okay,
conflict
yeah,
have been
well,
declining.
like I said, I
And
mean,
I'm not.
technology helps a lot, right? I mean,
Yeah.
with
So
that
it helps us kill people more
more
efficiently
efficiently.
and get the ones we want. Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm not making any kind of logical conclusion out of that. So the world, and also I'm not also saying that the world has become a more peaceful place. I mean, I think there, like you say, maybe we've had one day of peace in the 20th century. I struggle to think that we might find that in the 21st century unless we really, have a word with ourselves and go, hang on a second.
We only shift. That's all we do.
But when you say that, I mean, I think that's an interesting perspective that you don't really rely on any interaction with people who are in your locality. What do you think kind of has led to that stage where maybe we don't need to be collaborative, which begs an interesting question.
Well, it's in part the availability. Um, uh, it's not the word I really want, but the availability of resources, right? Um,
Uh-huh.
I can get in my car, I can go to a supermarket, and I can get anything I want. There are supermarkets, luckily they're a little bit further away from me, but there are supermarkets where you can walk in with
Mm,
only a credit card,
mm.
right? Nothing else. And that literally mean nothing else, just a credit card. You're butt naked, and you can walk
Where
in
where do you
there
where do you keep your credit card?
in your hand.
Ah,
Or if you have to carry a lot of stuff, be creative.
mm,
But you can walk in naked and you can walk out with everything you need to fill a house, inclusive all your clothing, all your
mm,
food for a long time, and that's just in one building.
mm.
And that means that you, well, you're dependent on the supermarket and the banks and that infrastructure, obviously, but the amount of human interaction that you need in order to do everything that you need to do in order to live requires no human contact.
That's right. Yeah,
And
that's
I
right.
think, and in the old days, you had to walk somewhere and have interaction with your bakery or your baker. You had to have an interaction with your butcher. You had to have a regular interaction with your landlord if you had one, or your people that rented from you or lived on your land or whatever. I mean, you had to have a certain regular daily contact with people, and that in turn forces you to have um, some social skills.
Okay, so like you're a bit like me. Like you could gab until the cows come home. And we both like talking and interacting with people.
Yeah.
You're suggesting that we're unlearning some of those social skills. There's a drive, surely there's a drive for people to want to connect. I know that we could go to a supermarket. Like you're right, I could go through an entire day not actually uttering any words apart from to my dogs if I
Mm-hmm.
chose to.
Mm-hmm. I think the
But
problem is even bigger than that. I mean, it's the um, the diminishing level of education that we experience, um, where we teach our children less and less in a more predictive manner, um, and it's the anonymity of the internet and those kind of things which cause um, the amazing drop in decent social behavior that we're witnessing. Um, I'm not entirely sure if we don't, I
So
don't think we've
we're cutting
mentioned
off
that one.
we're cutting off our noses to spite our face. Is what I
Well, we're
what
not
I'm following, because
learning. We're not learning something. We're moving really fast in this digital age, right? I mean, the technology is just, it's not quite yet out of control, but we're getting there very rapidly. And singularity is something that's a real thing. That's where technology develops faster than humans can grasp its momentum or something like that. And for a lot of people, that point has already been reached, and it gets more difficult to catch up. But the development goes faster and faster, so it'll be
yeah,
more difficult for people to catch up or to stay in touch with all those developments. And the gaps between those who know and those who don't know are getting bigger and bigger,
yeah,
and that goes
absolutely.
faster and faster. And so, but we're not learning how to deal with those kind of things. We're adapting, and as quickly as we can, and some are more able to adapt than others, but we're not learning, right?
That's exactly right. That's what I think comes back to that thing I was saying earlier. That the tragedy is that we have surpassed ourselves in the technology that we've
Mm-hmm.
got, but we're not keeping up with our ability. We've
No.
created a world that we actually don't know how to cope with,
It's
and that's the
it's the
the tragedy is that we've walked blindly.
yeah, utterly, because this is happening so fast that people really don't, they really don't have time to just stop and think. It, I mean, all the other things that we did in the past, um, certain behaviors and things like that took thousands of years to develop,
Mm.
and some a little bit less, but we didn't just uh, went from a couple of guys who were just chasing a mammoth to living in a huge city. I mean,
Mm, mm,
and
mm.
being able to interact with each other, or maybe not a big city, but it's yeah.
But our techno, we were able, I guess, in a sense, we were kind of able to keep up with the technological developments that we were coming up with at the time.
It was back
And
then. It
maybe
was
when it
difficult
came to
for
the Industrial
people.
Revolution,
It was
sure.
still difficult. I mean, what is it like? They tried to have a law somewhere in Kansas or something with a car, that if a car would meet a horse and carriage,
Mm.
the car would have to, every half a mile, would have to shoot up a flare to let everybody know that it's coming. It would have to stop the car on the side of the road to let the horse pass. If the horse didn't dare, oh, and it would have to put a cover over the car so it would blend into the landscape, so the horse would be able to walk by. If the horse didn't dare to go by, then the owner of the car would be forced to take the car apart and carry it
Right.
past the horse, and then put
Well,
the car back together again.
this is what I was thinking. Like maybe it didn't come until the Industrial Revolution, and we started to mass produce things, that technology began to outpace our ability to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
That previously, advances in human society, technological advances were far slower than we see today,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe we were able to keep up with them. But again, come back to that quote: we've got Stone Age emotions, medieval institutions, and this amazing technological world that we have just not kept up with.
Yeah.
And I think when you talk about we could live our lives really separated from each other, even though we're highly interconnected now, because you can't get your food because you rely on a highly interconnected and complex system of food delivery to get to your supermarket. We actually, on a human level, we could get through our lives with little encountering of each other. However, I think that contrasts with what I think is a real innate human need to connect and be with others, and therefore we get this phenomena of an epidemic of loneliness, as it's been called. People feeling more and more lonely, more and more disconnected. It pains us. It makes us sick. So there's something that we haven't been able to keep up with. So we've got these amazing tools, these digital tools. Potentially, we could be collaborating far more than we ever have done, but we're still being dicks to each other. We've used the tools for. Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit sort of crass and generalistic, to look at cats and to insult each other on Twitter. But the pockets of collaboration, they seem more like competition. People arguing about which collaborative tool is the best one, which ones we should and shouldn't use. And people, grandstanding and saying my ideas are the best, and it's this society that we've constructed around us, this sort of materialistic industrial society that we've constructed, where maybe we just matter less. We've created this monster, and we actually matter less for this thing that we're supposed to really matter about.
I wrote a blog post a while ago, and it was social business is all about business. And that's not necessarily a good thing, and that was at that time anyway.
It's a good point.
Was my conclusion of the whole thing, when I was just observing that social business universe that I immersed myself in. There were obviously there's authentic people, and there are authentic companies who really see the opportunity to make a positive change in the world or in the workplace. But the fact that all these companies sprout up, and all these huge companies jump, like SAP and Microsoft and IBM, and they all jump on it in a massive way. And that tells me that, it's not about changing the world or making people more happy. No, it's about creating a product that can shift. That's what they want, and it's about business. That bottom line is just, it's irrevocable. Did I use that word properly?
Yeah. So there's no coming back from it.
No, there's unless you really try and find some sort of an open source platform which is built and maintained by a community. You're stuck with license fees and all those kind of things, and it's business, and it's good business, right?
Yeah.
But it's business nonetheless, and I think that's kind of missing the point of this idea. It's the business is, at one end you sell. You move the boxes, right? You sell licenses or whatever. You get people to use the product by any means necessary. Obviously, at some point, you find a way which is more productive than any other way, and that turns out to be a best practice where you make sure people are engaged and connected with each other, and then they can use the platform, right? But it really comes back to the human part, the social part of a social network, which defines how well it will work. If you focus too much on the ROI and the KPI and the business end and the business goals and all those kind of things, and then it will fail.
See, you're right. That's a question that I hear, regularly, that the adoption of these tools is because we haven't kind of got people on board with it, or there's a cultural thing, or there's something around. There's a step before then, I think, where it's tapping into people's drive to collaborate and drive to be with each other. And again, it goes in contradiction to the rather mechanistic structures that we've used to organize our businesses, which will, I believe, naturally tend to silos and separation. If you structure a business in a command and control hierarchical way, you will get, I think, silos. It just seems like a corollary. And I'm probably missing something in there, but it seems like it doesn't surprise me to find that we've got silos, that we have people not really collaborating at work, because none of the structures really encourage it.
Yeah, I always have the feeling that uh, when you create a structure like that, a really strict command and control structure with silos, and you want a sort of adversarial behavior between departments.
It's what it looks like to me.
Well, that's where you can create loyalty within the silos, right? And that's what you want. And my experience with that, I mean, if you try and get HR to do anything, they won't. They will shut the door. I mean,
Sure.
a couple of years ago, and I'm sure there's still companies that have that difficulty yet. When I was working in Brussels, I mean, that's just what we're talking about. 2.5 years ago, try and get anything changed on the intranet. I don't really think HR was particularly in control of that, but somebody was in control, and they would not let go. It was not open for discussion. Period. Or full stop. And that's something that they and I do my finger air quote thingy. They would want that. I mean, if you have a command and control structure, then you want that little bit of adversarial behavior, because
I mean, and I take your point. Like you maybe you want to engender a little loyalty within departments, and certainly, if I think about my heart cells, I want my heart cells to be loyal to being a heart cell and to maintaining the functioning of my heart, but they don't compete with my liver cells or my lung cells. See what I mean? Like the structure we've created is a business as a machine, not a business as a living, breathing entity that's got life and is adaptive.
But they have to be able to communicate with each other.
Absolutely. But there's a completely different model, which is one is a machine and one is a living and breathing and complex entity, like my body, where my heart doesn't compete with my lungs, doesn't compete with my liver, doesn't compete with my digestion. It works in beautiful sync as a complex system, and my organs don't compete with each other. Whereas you find that departments within a business, because it's constructed like a machine, they seem to compete with each other. They want primacy over the other, or I guess that's
well,
the thing I'm saying.
It's a fundamental.
It doesn't engender, the structure doesn't engender collaboration.
No, and that's exactly
as my body engenders collaboration.
Exactly, and that's, I think, I mean, that's very well put, because I think if you look at it on a global scale, or on a societal scale, that is the problem. We have all these institutions, whether they're from the government down, all these care facilities, and then we have all sorts of businesses, and we have all sorts of industries that compete with each other for space, for time, for money, for resources. And then we have, within those industries, there are the businesses that compete ferociously with each other for time, people, money, resources. And within those businesses, you have all sorts of departments that fight ferociously for time and resources and people. And within the departments, you have people who are fighting for the time and the resources and the money and all those kind of things. And there is no harmony. It's not there. It's not just there on with me and the dude across my desk. No, it's all the way up to on a huge societal level, on a global scale. I mean,
now is that down to the unlearning that you mentioned earlier?
We're just not capable of being able to control our own impulses. If you have the Amused to Death album from Roger Waters, he says at some point, give any one species too much rope and they'll fuck it up. And that's true. And there is not any species on this planet has to be controlled by some other species in some way, even top predators or whatever, it doesn't really matter. I mean, New Zealand, with all the deer that they had there, they absolutely ravished the countryside because there was no natural predator. So they had to shoot deer from a helicopter just by the dozens just to get rid of them. They were a pest.
Same in Scotland. Exactly. It's not a natural place for a deer, and then the Highlands were populated with deer so that the New English landowners could go and shoot deer up there, and it's ravaged the countryside.
No, well, those kind of things, and people, in our infinite wisdom, just want more, basically, of everything, usually. And I watched a documentary once, and they calculated how many people, how many humans this planet would be able to sustain if we did not use fossil fuels. And they came to around 3 billion. That would be the sweet spot. I mean, we could move all over the place and we can do things, but at some point you cannot physically move more than what you can physically move, basically, like food or whatever. You cannot travel too far away from your source of food, or you get into trouble and those kind of things. So that would hit 3 billion. But due to technology, we're moving, what, are we already past 7 billion or?
Yeah.
Breathing Earth.
So this isn't good enough for me.
No.
Because I think what we're doing is reimagining. So I refuse to believe that we can't learn. I refuse to believe that we can stop unlearning. If we reimagine other ways of doing this, now we found ourselves in a situation now we've probably got too many people than, as you say, the Earth could cope with. But here we are. We've got these amazing technologies, which, as you say, the gap between the people that understand it and that don't is widening, and that is slightly frightening. If you kind of extrapolate in a tiny way the Internet of Things and so on and so forth, we've got this stuff. We can't uninvent it. We can't unlearn about digital social media. But if we reimagine the things that we probably could develop in ourselves, so that we maybe won't catch up entirely, but if we can begin to say, okay, take digital social media out of it, we have got to become more collaborative on this planet. We've got to be more collaborative in our workplaces. We're coming to the end where we see our overuse of resources is screwing up our living conditions. How can we reimagine? What are the things that we can do? Like I'll talk from my little corner of things, which is sociometry, and the work that J.L. Moreno brought. There's a opportunity that's been missed, I think, there, and I think it's important that we keep pushing, people connecting, developing relationships. But what other things I think would be useful for us to reimagine? Because I don't want to finish this podcast. I certainly don't want people listening to kind of sign off and go, well, let's just end it all then. Because I think
that was bloody disappointing.
We're reimagining.
Or depressing.
Or at least kind of, yeah.
Well, I think it's something that starts with on a very personal level, right? I mean, it's been said that you don't have to worry about things that are outside of your circle of influence because you can't influence them, literally. There's just no way you can influence anything outside of your circle, and hence there's no reason to really worry about that. So then again, you do have influence, or you can, extrude influence on your own personal circle. And that is where you can actually make some change for the better. And that's where it starts. I mean, if the person across from you at work has a bit of an attitude problem, and it's just not, you're not working well together, then there's two things you can do, or you can go somewhere else, or there's three things you can go somewhere else. You can just leave it as it is and deal with it, or you can try and fix it, and then you can try and open the dialogue, have a conversation, and see what the problem really is, and why are we having this difficulty. And I think most of the time it's just a lack of communicating which causes the friction in the first place. And then it might be a good idea to get people like you in, or do a course, or like the workshops that you do, and just to yeah, just to uh, uh, get that info, that insight that you need in order to understand what it is that's going on, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, in that frame, I mean, I do like to think that what I do is only to catalyze something, which I think is there's a natural drive for, and we have some skills. Like, and I think what you say is, you know, have a communicate as a without sounding too cliche. You know, somebody anger is only the expression of an unmet need. So there's something going on for the person. They're grumpy or they've got an attitude problem. There's something there's some need that's not being met by them. Absolutely, I agree. As you know, why not try and communicate and draw it out? And you know, we don't learn how to communicate unless we practice communicating. You know, talking about it or reading it in a book is not going to make us good communicators. Like reading a book about skiing is not going to make me a good skier.
No.
Reading a book about archery is not going to make me a good archer. So maybe we've unlearned some things. Maybe we do have to give it a go. Maybe we do have to, in some cases, pluck up a bit of courage, because we didn't used to do. We're not used to saying to people, "How are you going? You seem a bit upset today." We don't used to doing that generally in our lives with people, because the convenient way is just to not, because we can get by. We get by and finish our work at 5, go home and have our dinner, and you know we've got through a day. I agree with you. Why not try and communicate and find out a little
Well,
bit more
that's when
about
you
what's behind
unlearn.
it?
That is exactly when you unlearn. That is when you do your thing, when you go to work every day from 9 to 5, you get home, you eat dinner, you watch TV, you go to bed, you get up, and you do the same thing. That is when you unlearn the skills that you need. And if you are, repressing the use of modern technology, the social networks, or the internet in general. I'm not saying that everybody should be on Facebook, but it's we've managed to turn our productive hunter gatherer, or what's the other one, farming lives that most of us had in the generations past, into a very monotone consumerism way of living, where we just
Yeah.
consume. That's all we do. We just consume, and we don't
And
produce
and the
anything.
way we exactly and that kind of materialistic we've got does create pressure on us to just conform, and we do create this sort of bland picture of the world that we live in, which I don't think is true. See, I think I think it's a little bit about shifting how we see things too.
Yeah,
The world isn't as bland and as flat as the mainstream media and so on would have us believe.
yeah,
Um, if we maybe approach people with the idea that their grumpiness or their lack of cooperation in the workplace, or their what looks like being competitive and trying to patch protection and all that stuff, if we look at that rather than them being nasty piece of work, then there's a human need that's not being met, and we approach that maybe in a reimagined workplace, we start by just developing some skills on being kind and convivial and friendly with each other as a starting point. And I think there was a comment that was in our last podcast, that you get more with honey than with vinegar. I think we can take that a long way, really.
mm-hmm.
And we might get some of that relearning the things that perhaps we have unlearned, in order to get to a place where we are actually collaborating more and it won't actually have anything to do with the fact that we've got lots of amazing digital social tools. It'll have a large part will be down to the fact that we've invested ourselves in the social bit of social business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That would be very, preferable. And I still think that, like I said earlier, also that it is something that we're lacking, and because we're still we're focusing really hard on the product itself. We want or
Absolutely.
some need an Apple Watch, and very
Yeah.
few that actually buy one of those stops and think, how can it actually add to my life, to my daily routine? And I must honestly say that with this one, with the Apple Watch, I've seen, excuse me, more articles about people actually asking that question. How does it contribute to my life? Does it at all do that? Which is not something that I've heard very often in the past decade, so to speak.
About whether it contributes to our lives.
Yeah, like an iPhone or an iPad
Sure.
or another phone or a digital camera or another
Sure.
laptop or anything of those kind of things. Nobody really stopped and asked, does this really,
Add to my quality of life. Yeah.
does it at all? And with the
Yeah.
with the Apple Watch, people are actually asking that question. So maybe that's a good trend.
That's an interesting point. It is a good trend, and well, I don't wish people ill. A bit of me goes, I really don't want something like the Apple Watch to be a wild success, because again, it's like, where are we putting our efforts? I wouldn't. I'm not saying that I want Apple Watch to be a failure, but my point is, again, to emphasize what you said, we focus too much on the product, and as you were saying that, I kind of turned it upside down, and actually, with the product is the process, and I'll say what I mean by that. I know a little bit about what goes on in the theater world, and that I've heard people say, you get your process on stage, and by that, if you have a rehearsal process which is fragmented and fractious and argumentative and uncooperative and uncollaborative and highly ego driven and so on, when you get that thing, when you move the play from the rehearsal room to the stage, it's what you see. And as an audience member, you can watch this and you can go, well, these people aren't connecting, they're not telling the story together, they're not working together, they're not collaborating. And it comes out of, like, the product that you see on stage is the process that they have used backstage. They haven't focused on connecting up and what's our shared vision and where what's the story we're all trying to cooperatively tell. And so I think we do focus too much on the product, but in that we actually forgotten that we get a product that is the process that we use. And so we get businesses in a customer facing way, relating to customers, and I'm sure you know this from experience, and I do, relating to customers in a way which is fragmented, which feels chaotic, which feels disorganized, which feels, you're not on my side. And then you learn a little about what's going on in the business, and that's how they operate internally. You get outside what you've got inside.
Yeah.
And so it seems to me that if you want to take a purely bottom line approach to it, it would be a really good thing for your return on investment to invest a little bit in how can we collaborate better? How can we break down some of our silos? How can we be focused on each other and helping each other meet each other's needs internally? Because if you've got that orientation, if you've developed and relearned those social skills internally, it kind of seems that it would flow when you're relating to customers. Could be a crazy idea, I don't know, but you see what I mean? Like, everything is connected. Everything is connected for me.
It's absolutely true. I mean, I can totally close friend of mine, and well, she's on the customer care
Yeah.
end of the stick, and I mean, Lee Bryant and Post Shift, they also say it, right? I mean, if you look at the company, which is the most important part of the company? It's that bit which touches your customers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's not the CEO. It's
Yeah,
not
that's right. Yeah.
like that huge chunk of overhead that you have floating around that is trying to be smart and making decisions and look good in their new
That's
suit,
right.
but they don't have the contact with the client. They sometimes have a contact, or they like to pretend they have when they're on stage doing a
Sure.
keynote. They
Yeah.
like to pretend that they have that connection with people, but they don't.
That's right.
And especially not with the ones that are complaining about their product, because they avoid them like the plague.
They avoid them like the plague. Exactly.
So it's the customer care that actually has the contact with people. And so they are the most important branch of a company and should be regarded and treated as such, as far as I'm concerned. But in her case, that's definitely not the case. They're the bottom dwellers, right?
Right.
And they don't get any cooperation. They don't get any information from sales or from technical or whatever. They have to beg for information. Just help me out because I got a client, and what did you want my client to say that you don't know, or and that contact gets it's like sandpaper, right? All the time. It's just there's so much friction all the time that it takes quite a lot of skill for the operatives that are or the customer care agents to maintain a civil level of conversation with the clients is just amazing, the things that they do. And had they the support that they need and the flexibility behind them that they need, then their job would be so much more smooth, and the experience of the customer would be so much better.
They take a wild stab in the dark and would maybe, if you surveyed the customers, that they might experience the company a bit like sandpaper.
I would say so.
Yeah.
I would not probably take a huge leap if you would format the questions like
Yeah.
that, then they would not be overly thrilled. I mean, I know that there's clients moving away
Oh, well, there you go.
because of how badly sometimes is being problems are being dealt with, and they just don't have the time for that kind of shit. So they just move away to a company that does it better, and
that feels less like sandpaper. Absolutely.
yeah,
Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
yeah, no, exactly. And that's the importance and the social skills that you need within a company. You and I emphasize the word need. You really do need them. And some companies just manage to plow on just because of their heritage and just because of their market share, and because of one or two really cool products. But it's just a matter of time before somebody else figures it out and has good customer care.
So to paraphrase something that we've both read recently, by separating customer care from internal collaborative social learning, businesses have walked blindly into tragedy. Really.
Yeah. If you lose sight of what it is that's important, then you stumble at some point. And
sure.
Whether that's a business that focuses way too much on top management and sales rather than on long-term care, or it's a complete species that disregards its personal or its entire environment.
Mm.
But bringing it all the way back to the workplace, I mean, if you lose sight of what, for you at least, is important, and that
Mm.
it has to be human interaction, right? I mean,
Mm.
for by far the most part of the people that go to work, uh, there is that, and it's an important bit. And if you ignore it, then you just turn up, do your thing, and go home,
Mm.
and it just you know
Mm.
takes away from the pleasure that you could have at work, because it can be fun, even if the job itself is not all that yappy. I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that people report that makes their job satisfying, I think one of the major things is they have fun with their coworkers. They enjoy their coworkers.
mm-hmm.
And certainly I'd like to think that, if I was working in a large business, that I could rely on people to be, friendly with me and you know, when I request information or help, that they would be more willing to say yes than to say no. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's part of it, right? I mean, if you work in an environment where those kind where the the not so lovely part of human interaction is prevalent, try and get something
Mm,
done.
mm, mm.
There's I mean, even asking the person across from you, do you have that report that I missed it, I've deleted it or whatever, can you get it to me?
Mm, mm.
And it goes like, no.
I'm assuming that you're hopeful that we can relearn some of these things. Would I be right?
That's definitely, because that's part of the reason why I love social business so much, and that I like doing this podcast and talking to you about these kind of things, because it does give me, uh, besides the fact that I think it can be done, I also think it's immeasurably important that it happens, and because we are lacking as a species on so
Mm,
many levels. We're flawed.
mm.
Sure, we are. Um, there's very, very, very few people who are righteous, right? And even
Mm.
those who see the problems don't always play, by the most clean rules in order to, there's always something.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, but taking control of that your own bubble, um,
Mm, mm,
is
mm.
is still definitely very possible. We're not in North Korea, right?
Mhm, mhm,
And I doubt anybody ever will listen in North Korea to our podcast,
mhm,
but we're not there. We live in a world where we can take control of our bubble, and if we can combine our technology that we're having now, and
mm.
which is being developed, which is absolutely awesome. Uh, Combine that with all the knowledge that we've had, that we gathered over the past 3 decades,
Mhm,
and the smart people that I know,
mm.
um, you know, and try and get people to, because the thing is that what we do at work, most of us, some of us, is something that requires, maybe it is the digital change, the digital transformation that is required in order for us to be as productive or as communicative as we need or want to be in the working
Mm,
environment, right? I
mm.
mean, because maybe you know, your daily run to the bakery would suffice to have your input of social, collaboration
Sure.
with the rest of the village. It would keep you up to date. You could share a story here. hear a story there, and you're good to go. You're fine,
Mm.
right? But in this day and age, I mean, the jobs that we do, I mean, they've evolved so extreme that, sure, maybe all that digital stuff can help us in order to move about in our modern world. But all we need to do is to make sure that we do it the right way,
Mm.
and
And we keep our human values in there.
exactly, yeah, keep them
Yeah, yeah,
high.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I absolutely don't deny the possibilities that digital affords us. Absolutely. I mean, here we are podcasting.
yeah,
I
exactly.
use social media. I use social media a lot. I love the fact that in my iPhone, my office is held in my hand when I'm out and about.
Mm,
I love all that stuff. But I
mm.
do think there is an element of let's keep to some human values. Let's make sure human values are built into that, and that we don't just press blindly for us to have these technologies, for the sake of them.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
don't just give us another platform with which to be dicks to each other and with which to ignore each other and which to
Yeah,
block each other. That
yeah,
we actually develop ourselves
yeah.
in sync or in conjunction with, even though our technologies I think have outstripped our understanding of them. But we do need to keep up to speed with how we keep sort of building community with each other.
Sure.
And here is a platform that allows us to do it, far and wide.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's the beauty of it. And by all means, embrace it as
Mm.
such. But yeah, grow up and
Yeah,
behave.
well, that's it. Yeah, grow up. Yeah, yeah. Download the stuff and then grow up,
Yeah,
and keep growing. Yeah.
yeah. And don't take it for granted. And uh, don't use it blindly, right?
Mm.
Don't use it just because it's there. Don't do it just because you can.
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
think before you react. I mean, we're all communicating with the speed of light now,
that's right.
and it can go very wrong very fast.
Yes. Yeah.
And you don't want that. I mean, you want to have, you have to remain civil. I mean, that's I did a tweet like, I don't know, that is what separates us from animals. Not being able to
Mm.
walk on our hind, not our opposing
Opposable
thumb or
thumbs.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's being civil to each other. Animals just don't do that, right? Um, and humans can. We have that choice. We have the ability to choose, to
We can make
decide
some
to be
conscious choices. That's right. Yeah.
exactly, to be
Yeah.
civil to each other, to not, be a dick online or in the workplace, or not to be a bully and those kind of things. And so few of us, sometimes it feels that way, that so
And I think
few of
that's a
us actually do that.
it's a really good point that we have the ability to make a conscious choice about it, because I think embedded in that for me is don't wait for others to make the first move. And I think that's one of the things I've seen go on in real life and online. The whole thing about let's have some trust, let's have respect. But then you see that kind of virtual arm folding, you go first.
Yeah,
And I think we can make a conscious choice of, we'll get that back if we start to provide it for people. But playing the you first game doesn't work
mm,
in my mind. It's
mm,
we may open ourselves up to being snubbed or hurt or rejected if we do have a go first. But if we don't have a go first, how many opportunities might we miss? So if
many.
somebody looks a bit low or a bit quiet or a bit grumpy or whatever at work, don't wait for the moment when you think is best. Have a go, because there's probably something going on for that person. There's a story that's not yet been told and could be the thing that unfolds more cooperation at work
Yeah,
and more
exactly.
helpfulness at work.
Be civil, have a conversation,
Yeah,
go and get a cup of coffee.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
there's in the past, God, how old am I? In the past 25 odd years, or a little bit more, 30 years, something, no, a little bit less, that I've been working, it's a handful of people.
Yeah. Yeah,
Really,
same.
really a
Yeah.
handful of people that just, genuinely uh, stepped up and said, dude, let's go have a cup of coffee. Tell me what's up.
Yeah. And I'm reminded often of my book of last year was Charles Eisenstein's The More Beautiful Will Our Hearts Know Is Possible. And I recommended that book like mad. It's one of the best I've read. And he talks about moving to a story of interbeing, moving away from the story of separation, which is the one that we currently inhabit, to a story of interbeing. And he says then it's not about being the Gandhi that starts a movement, or the Rosa Parks that starts a movement. It's, the person who gives up a year of their life to take care of an ailing parent is as much making a move towards a story of interbeing and caring for others as the person who starts a movement to, Indian independence and civil rights movements. There's no difference in the two. So there is no act that's too small. They're all significant, and they move us all to, being more collaborative with each other.
We mustn't lose sight of our humanity.
That's right.
And that is something that tends to happen with all the digital
that's
stuff
right,
that's going on.
Yeah.
Wow.
On that note, not losing sight of our humanity, which seems to be a conclusion that we often come up to. That's
true.
That's true. Social business is about business, and it's about social. Let's keep learning how to do both of those well.
Absolutely.
So until next time.
Yes.
Until next time, we say farewell.
And you can find us on rwcast.com. And please, while you're there, subscribe to our newsletter.
Yes.
Thank you very much.